Good evening, everyone. I'm Mio Stevens-Gandara, Assistant Professor of Photography and current organizer for cultural events at Rio Hondo College. The Cultural Events program at Rio Hondo College presents a diverse selection of arts and entertainment free of charge for our community. Rio Hondo's Cultural Events program showcases the visual and performing arts work of students and faculty, as well as regional, national, and international artists. Our spring semester programming focuses on youth and community empowerment. If we should face any technical difficulties, please be patient. We will work it out. If you have questions or comments, please post them and we will answer at the end of the talk. Tonight, we are excited to have Rio Hondo faculty member, Dr. George Gomez Wheeler, with us to host artist Pamelia Stickney for our series on Women in Tech. Whittier native and former Rio Hondo student, Dr. George Gomez Wheeler is a composer and performer of acoustic and electronic music. His work combines diverse instruments and genres, musical interactivity between performer and computer, concepts of spatialization, and video processing. He performed for 15 years as a saxophonist and technical director of the Liquid Skin Ensemble. He is a co-founding member of Frere Concrete, and has collaborated with choreographers for many years. As a professional sound engineer, he has worked with many local groups spanning from punk, rock, ska, and Latin jazz to postmodern contemporary classical. Dr. Gomez Wheeler received his PhD from UC Irvine in Integrated Composition, Improvisation, and Technology, and is the creator of Music and Integrated Technology program here at Rio Hondo College. Welcome, Dr. Gomez Wheeler and Pamelia Stickney.
All right. Well, I'd like to say that Mio's doing an amazing job with cultural events, so thank you, Mio. And it's an honor to be here. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like to quickly tell you about our new program, which is called Music and Integrated Technology, which offers a newly published associate's degree, as well as certificates in electronic music, production, recording, live sound, songwriting, etc. So the focus of this new program allows us to delve into new and exciting directions for cultural events programs as well. So with this backdrop, let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Pamelia Stickney. Visionary electronics pioneer Bob Moog called Pamelia one of the most important innovators of the theremin living today. And her unique talent has been captured both on recordings and in live performances by a wide spectrum of artists, including David Byrne, John Zorn, Simone Dinnerstein, Sébastien Tellier, and Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. Pamelia was also featured in the 2004 documentary titled Moog. So Theremin Orchestra is the name Pamelia gives her solo performances. These pieces are complex improvisations using live loops in which she builds and slowly transforms multiple layers of sound. These fragments that she creates range widely and can shift quickly from beautiful, almost pre-Baroque melodic lines to abstract, distorted blocks of noise full of dissonance and polyrhythmic components. So without further ado, let me welcome Pamelia Stickney. Man.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'd like to thank you all at Rio Hondo for inviting me to do this.
Yeah, great. What's really nice is that, when I think of the theremin, I think of it as a futuristic instrument. And one of the things that's interesting is that here we are on Thursday night and we're speaking to you in the future. You're in Vienna on Friday morning, right?
Yes, I'm saying hello to yesterday.
So how did you get interested in the theremin?
Well, how I got interested was when my boyfriend at the time came home from the video store with a documentary, and I was so pissed off. I was like, I wanted to watch an action film. What the hell is this? And then, it's like, okay, fine. This was before, watching things on the internet where you could just like stop and say, and we put it on, and I was blown away. The first shot in this film, Theremin, an Electronic Odyssey, you see Clara Rockmore, the first virtuoso of the instrument, and that sucked me in. I just thought, wow, I want to try that instrument. I didn't know yet how did it work or anything, but it sounded so beautiful. And then to learn, to understand that it is a synthesizer, in fact, something invented over 100 years ago now, and that it's controlled without any physical contact. That's so futuristic, even for these times. And I think it's the only synthesizer that I know of yet that that's possible to play in a way that you have a really good control of the vibrato and the dynamics, to make it sound so human and so vocal. It's very different than trying to work on a little pitch modulation wheel on a synth if you're trying to, fake a vibrato with that, for instance.
Yeah, there's a lot of human gesture and expression that this instrument really allows you to show us. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And also, a lot of us are familiar with the instrument before we've even seen it, because it was used in, these like 1950s sci-fi and horror films, and we even make reference to the theremin. Even a small child will when something is supposed to be scary, they'll go woo. And in pop culture, we reference it a lot without realizing.
Now, so was theremin the first instrument you played, or like, what is your musical background? What do you?
Well, I first began with the piano, and I've always been passionate about music, and I've always wanted to try whatever instruments I would get exposed to. I was always fascinated, especially with string instruments. And it wasn't until I was 12 that I finally, was in a public school that had an orchestra program. And so I just jumped in, I said, I play piano. And then it's like, can I try that? Can I try that? Can I try that? And so I like the logic of string instruments. And so I got accustomed to, fine tuning because of that. Whereas on a piano, you don't have to tune it. A tuner comes by and fixes it for you. And I think that, it's weird that a lot of things I learned along the way, I think contributed towards, being prepared for the theremin, with at least how I intended to try to explore on it. But there are a lot of discoveries I made with it along the way too, that are in a direction I never knew I would be going with it, musically, creatively, and an adventure of different types of music and people that I got to work with along the way, and that I learned new things from, and being exposed to music that I did not grow up hearing, like I did not grow up hearing Bartok. I did not, did not grow up hearing jazz. There were a lot of things that came along the way, but and so and thing that I've recently been checking into as well is Indian music, because with the theremin you can play not in our traditional 12-tone A440, let's say, tuning system, but I'm really excited to hear what happens when someone who has the ears for these different types of tunings starts playing the theremin, because whatever a voice can do, you could definitely do with the theremin.
Yeah. Also, too, I'd like to point out that to our music students who are listening, these musicianship skills, hearing pitch and being able to sing, as well as like what you played before in violin, it really kind of all connects together with this instrument.
Yes. But the thing is, this instrument doesn't have, it hasn't been around so long. And the beauty of it is no one can tell you you're doing anything wrong with it. And, and that's a really great thing. There's not this huge pressure to have to play it one certain way or another. Yeah. And it kind of opens my mind as well into, what is expression? What's musical expression? And, there are a lot of things I discovered in accident, like working with microtones. And it was because I kept messing up as I was trying to build a loop. But then it's like, this sounds so much more interesting. And you suddenly realize, yes, a lot of things that we hear every day have microtones in them that give a much richer, thicker sound. And even if you hear an orchestra, when you hear all of the string section playing in unison, the same note, let's say, the thickness that's involved is because there are some tiny microtones that each person is off from each other, and that makes that extra thickness.
Sure. Okay, so I think our audience is hooked, but they're trying to figure out, what is the theremin? What is it? How does it work? Where is it?
I'll give you a quick demo here, at least, just to get a glimpse of what's going on with the antennas, because oftentimes people don't know what's going on with my hands. So there are just two antennas I'm working with. The tall one is for controlling pitch. And my right hand is controlling the volume level. And when I move away from it, it gradually gets louder. And with this instrument, it has a lot more octave range, and that's kind of a development that came over time. They used to normally only hear theremins in more of like a singing female voice range, but it's possible to also play it in the deep octave levels, like a cello or a bass. And not sure if you can hear the bass. And people ask too, like, how do you get that staccato sound on it? And it's something that it kind of came by accident, because I did play contrabass before. I was playing jazz on that at the point that I came to the theremin, and I just discovered this technique for being able to create a staccato while shaping the sound so it has a bit of a sustain similar to a bass. And I think with this instrument, what's great is you're only working with pitch and volume, and you can really follow your ears, and there's not just one way to go about achieving the result that you're trying to get with it. So I don't think that any two thereminists ever sound exactly alike, just like vocalists. We all have our own idiosyncrasies.
Right.
and no two people will use the same types of fingerings for getting around. And I've heard, this is like really funny thing to say, but I have a student, he has his own special way with it, and it's really hilarious. But he's very super expressive visually as well, but he can actually mimic it and kind of in a jokey way make it sort of sound like a person is having an orgasm with the thing, and it's really funny. He's like,
that's great.
And everyone was cracking up. It's like, oh my gosh. It's like a comedy act with the theremin. Yeah. It's really cool.
So I think that you have a recording of yourself playing something that's a little bit more traditional. Can you introduce that for us?
Yeah, so there's a clip of me playing together with a pianist, and this is a piece that's called Vocalise. That's a Vocalise Etude by Olivier Messiaen. Because sometimes it's helpful to hear the theremin together, accompanied with the piano, let's say, so that you can get an idea of how it can sound.
Right. And this piece was originally written for piano and voice, right? So you're performing the vocal part.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I can hear the audience. Oh, there we go. It's such a virtuosic instrument, or can be, and you've just demonstrated that. It's beautiful. And I know you're a California native. If you ever are in the area and you want to do a master class and a concert at Rio Hondo College, you are welcome. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I'll definitely, we'll definitely make a plan for that the next time I come to visit family. I still have family there in Southern California, so I regularly try to come back to visit, and I would love to do that.
Yeah, I would love, and I personally would love to purchase a couple dozen of these instruments and try to get students learning on them, so you could do a master class with them and even turn it into an instrument that that they can use to transfer to our local Cal States and universities. I mean, I really feel like it's such an expressive instrument that it shouldn't be just it should be more widespread, I think. And I would love to talk to you more about this offline.
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. It's there's so many possibilities with it, and I of course like to perform it, in the so-called traditional way, because I just want to play things that I really love listening to, and want to push myself to be able to accomplish on it. And also it's for a first model, what I highly recommend is I'm playing always the Moog instruments. And I would recommend the Moog Etherwave, the standard Etherwaves by Moog. And sometimes people think, oh, it's cheaper, it must be the student model. And it's like, it is a professional instrument as it is. And that was the first instrument that I played before the later models came out. Yeah. And it's, it doesn't have the low octave range, but, there are tons of guitar pedals out there that you can use to give it extra octaves. So it's still in a playable position in the air. And, getting accustomed to that instrument kind of sets you up for it feeling even more like butter when you then, advance on into experimenting with the newer models that are out. There's the newest model that just came out, which is called the Clara Box, which is, celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the instrument. Right. And that's a new can of worms to get into, where you're able to create your own sound settings, really customizing it, and you also have possibility of using MIDI right. But to begin with, just for getting acquainted with the instrument, I highly recommend the Etherwave standard model, going completely analog and getting the feel for it. Yeah. And what's great is it's a really affordable instrument. Like if you wanted to buy a decent violin or a cello, let's say, or a piano, it's like, oh my gosh, right. That can be an arm and a leg, but it's kind right. of like getting your first electric guitar, about like $300-400 for a really good theremin.
Yeah, and also too, it can also, like you said, it can be a controller. You can hook up via MIDI through the computer and then use it also as an expressive element for filters and things. But before we get to okay, so let's talk about your Theremin Orchestra and how you maybe do loops or effects and things.
Yes. So what we can do right now is I'll put up some pictures so that you can see what my foot pedal setup looks like. So what I'm doing, because the theremin is just like a voice, you can only play one note at a time on it. And I had a gig once where, the budget was just so low. I thought, I can't afford to get other musicians involved. I don't want to make them work so hard and be paid so little. Right. And so I thought, how am I going to pull this off? And then I got the idea, I'm going to borrow a friend's looping pedal and let's see how that goes. And that's how it began for me to even come to the idea to explore using it in a completely different way. I had no idea yet what would be possible. And it was through working with looping pedals that I discovered, the beauty of microtones, because I kept making mistakes as I was trying to build a loop. I had an idea, I'm going to build this perfect thing, and then things would kind of get a little bit messed up along the way. And then I made discoveries because of that were interesting sounding. And so my pedal setup, the first picture, you can see there are numbers on the pedals. And that's to describe, what I'm plugging into in order of appearance. Let's say So the number 1 is the line 6 looping pedal or delay simulator. And what I often do is I like to build a loop inside of that. And then it runs through number 2, which is a harmonizer pedal. And what that means is if I can change the key of the overall loop, like make it in a higher tone range or a lower tone range, and simultaneously synchronize to the original loop as well. And then pedal number 3 is for manipulating the sounds. That's a micro synth pedal. And these close-up pictures of the green pedal, I have well, there was there's a thing for doing double time, and on this set of pictures here, you could see the micro synthesizer up close, and the pitch shifter or a pitch bay pedal, it's just so you have an idea that when I'm working with a micro synth, it's sort of as if I would be using a regular synthesizer and plugging a sound to go through it so that I can manipulate or use the trigger function and the start and stop frequency. It'll make much more sense once we pull up these video clips, and then you'll get to see it in action. I have a couple of video clips that demonstrate what it looks like and sounds like as I'm building one piece at a time with a focus at where my feet are, because I spend a lot of time on the floor when I'm playing solo. And that's a little bit baffling for people too, because like, what's going on? Where's the sound coming from? And I'm basically manipulating what I've built in the first looping pedal. So here's the first clip.
Cool.
Now you can hear a second voice coming in on top of the original one. Now it's like 3 string players together.
Are these like improvisations or like rehearsed improvisations, or do you notate them out? What's your process?
It's just improvisations. I love very strange types of harmonies, and so that usually is what comes out naturally, and I have to sometimes force myself, like, I'm going to do something purely pentatonic and then manipulate it. And now you can see I'm working with a micro synth. I'm pulling the trigger up, and here I'm playing a bass line, and the bass line suddenly is making a trigger for and you can barely hear the tiny high pitches of the loop that's inside of it. And as I build a loop now with a bass line, not paying attention to where the seam of the loop is, I'm not using MIDI or anything, rhythmical effects start to happen because the earlier bass lines that are inside of it are not as loud as the new ones I'm putting in. So now there's kind of this illusion that I'm percussively like a drummer playing fills. That nice crunchiness is from the micro synth pedal. And now I'm doing a little bit of messing around with the rate switch. Then I creep over to the second looping pedal, and I have it in analog tape delay simulator. And here I'm playing with the delay time. You can hear it smearing suddenly. And so I like doing things like this oftentimes when I'm playing with the drummer, and the drummer can then respond to the percussive rhythmic things that I'm doing, and so we can kind of feed each other. And here's a second loop I'm building where I'm going to go microtonal with this, and that's where I'm not paying attention to having to, land specific notes in general, but it's more about getting textures.
So for some of our audience who's listening, Microtones are things that notes that are fall, I don't know what you would say, between the pianos, between the piano notes.
Yeah.
How
It's
would
like,
you?
well, it's like when you hear, for instance, the sound of what I'm doing right now, it kind of sounds like chimes or glass or metal. There are lots of things like church bells when you hear them. They kind of ring out in a special way because there are these different tones that you wouldn't be able to find on a piano because, yeah, they're in the in-between places.
Yeah.
And so now there's several pitches that are kind of like twinkling stars. And I'm using the second looping pedal to give kind of a nice delay, make it sound a little bit wet. Now the harmonizer is kicked in. I'm starting to thicken it more now.
It's kind of like you have like an FM synthesis going on with these like inharmonic overtones that are all kind of clashing together, and that gives it that really glassy feel.
Yeah, totally. And then when there's like the harmonizer like that's perfectly harmonizing that goes in, then it's even more dissonance and thickness. I'm playing with the half-time, double-time buttons of the two looping pedals, and now it sounds like chimes being struck and bells. And that's without using the microsynth pedal. This is purely working with pitches.
Yeah.
And this is another technique too for playing percussively if I'm, wanting to do something rhythmic with other players. And the last video clip, then you can hear me doing a little more work with the microsynth pedal. Add a little bit of harmonizer to this. And sometimes I fade between the two different parallel pitches of the above harmonizer or the below one against the original signal, and that's a way you can also change the key of the loop as it's moving about or change the type of chords it's doing in real time. This is like the total poor man style of like analog.
Well, I was thinking it's like there's nothing digital about this. Does the theremin that you use have any presets, or is it all?
There are preset sounds, and I'm usually using just one of the preset sounds or a different one for the bass.
Yeah. But other than that,
but it's
completely
customized. Yeah. I seem to work in an analog way with with the pedals, and yes, it's a can of worms that got opened up when I got into working with pedals.
Nice.
And here, it's kind of fun to reverse what I'm doing with the stop and start frequencies and pulling the attack delay up as well eventually, and then rhythmic things start to happen.
Yeah. That's great because you go from performer to kind of sound designer all in the same.
Yeah. And also, it's a performance in itself to slowly, turn these knobs and manipulate. I haven't added anything to the loop, but there's so much to be able to morph, and I think this is a thing that would be very hard to write for an orchestra. Let's say, how do you get the players to like in real time morph their sounds? My concern was always like, how can I make some transitions and make some changes happen much more quickly without having to play a note.
Yeah, that was great. So how long do you think it would take for somebody to become proficient on the instrument?
Oh, that's a good question. It's the same as for learning a language or any, for some people it's faster than for others. It really kind of depends on, I think for one thing, at first, trying to figure out realistically what it is that you're shooting for with it. Because I'm not only playing the theremin still, but there are often times when I know that there's a composition or an idea that doesn't lend itself to the theremin, and so I'll jump to a different instrument for that. And with the theremin, to become, I don't think I'm not sure how to say what it would be, but it's more figuring out what it is that you want to do with it.
Yeah.
And so if you're wanting to use it in a microtonal way and work with exploring pedals, it might not be necessary to have to learn to play it in the traditional way.
Yeah.
So it can be explored, and that exploration of it with an open mind might also influence how the player then wants to work with it. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so then you also brought some live concert footage, right? From with
Yes.
your ensemble. Can you introduce your group to us?
Yeah. Well, first, the first clip I'm playing solo, and it's a short piece, so then you can get an idea of the journey that it goes on. It's kind of like storytelling to to build it. It's like let's make a big bang and build the universe one note at a time, and then start manipulating. It's like you get to play God when you're working with these pedals and loops. You can create something that's monstrous and like a storm and horrible, and you have the power to stop it. Yay! Nobody gets killed. You can make a natural catastrophe and nobody gets hurt.
Nice.
And it's good that we forget sometimes it's okay to take a risk playing music, because no one gets physically injured unless you light things on fire and throw objects around. But
Yeah. Okay, so what's the name of this piece?
this one I named it just in the moment before playing it. I was blabbing on stage, and I thought, like, these yoga people tell you, like, don't think anything and feel everything. And I thought, what would it be like if you just like forget everything and feel nothing without being dead?
Yeah, very zen. Right. Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks for sharing it there too. So that's at least a taste of what I'm doing. When I'm by myself, I love string music, and so it was kind of like a fun thing to get to without having to gather up a bunch of string players and having to write everything out. Like to be able
Right.
to improvise something and work with what comes up is really a fun challenge, and to take a lot of risks too, because if I make a mistake, I've got to figure out how to make the most of it.
Right.
In
Do
real
it again.
time.
Let them know you progressed it. Yeah.
And the next clip that's going to come up, I'm playing with my band Blue Blue, which has Chris Yanka on guitar and Mark Hollip on drums. And in this group, we have a lot of improvisation as well as written music. And I like playing as in the role of a bass player at moments, or also in a lead role, and using effects pedals like distortion. But then I also like to incorporate my looping pedal technique and manipulating like sound design things in real time, interacting with the other musicians. And so this is I think this clip kind of has a little bit of everything going on in there, that in one song.
Great. Now, I'd like to say to our listeners, if there's anything, this will be the last piece that we introduced before we go to questions and answers. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and hopefully we can get to them with the remaining time we have.
This song we called Detunata because the guitar is kind of microtonally out of tune.
So then, is this a free improv, or is it kind of a structured thing now that you're working with other people here?
Well, it has a structured part, and then we leave room to improvise. But how we shoot off into the improv, we do very familiar things that kind of give us a cue when we're going to different sections.
It's kind of like jazz where the head comes back, right? It's
Yeah.
circular. Oh, so very cool. It's really great to listen to it, via the internet, but I can imagine how great it would be in person. I look forward to that soon, I hope. Okay, well, I believe that it's time for some question and answer. Where's Mio? Oh, there's Mio. Hi, Mio.
Time for Q&A. So we have quite a few comments, which is awesome. So we'll start with the first one by Van Priest, who's one of the deans here at Rio. Van says, when you're freely improvising, do you have some melodic or harmonic basis in mind?
That's a great question. Sometimes I do. Like a thing I really like working with, sometimes I'll give myself a set of parameters. Like I like sometimes taking this messianic octatonic scale. And so I might build a loop based on that. And what's great is I have a lot of freedom then to redefine by playing a bass line underneath that doesn't have to adhere to that rule. And what's great is I can go over the bar line and I can suddenly be expressing and have a lot of freedom in my bass line while there's something that's still cohesive and together. And other times, you know, I might just go completely freely into it, although I do have an idea and I remember what I put in and what I'm putting in. So sometimes I'll build a loop, I call it in silence. And that means I do not have the playback coming up. And I will definitely, I remember what I'm putting into it, but I'm also adhering to a particular type of scale, let's say. So I'd also like this 9-note scale where it's like, for example, if it's like da 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 da, you know, it takes that long to turn into an octave, and to build something that's along those lines in silence, and then to pull up the volume level suddenly of the loop that's been built with those things in mind, then running it through a harmonizer. And when the harmonizer is perfectly putting it into fourths, or, you know, and I can also change that in real time, the parameters, I'm suddenly changing the chords in real time. And I could then take that and record it into another later looping pedal, and to make that into a whole other meter, let's say, that I'm recording into the looping pedal. And that gives me something new to work with and play against as well. So I do find it helpful having some sort of harmonic basis in mind, but other times I'll just go stream of consciousness, and because it's kind of like dreaming, you'll still make something somewhat cohesive and somehow understandable to yourself. I think there are tendencies and things that just happen, and so from doing it so long. Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Dad.
You know, it's great. Our Theory 4 class, our students just finished doing an octatonic scale project. So those were just turned in last week. So I hope their ears are like, oh, I hear that. I know what that is.
We have another question. I hope I pronounced this name right. Deanna Warhay wants to know what musicians, I think she means, what musicians are you influenced by?
Oh, that's a really great question. I'm not just influenced by musicians. You know, there are vocalists who I've heard. You know, a wide variety. I mean, things that we hear on the radio, or I might not even know their names. You know, it might be an operatic vocalist I've heard, and then also it's more for me oftentimes composers and certain works of theirs that really have a big influence on me. I really love certain elements. I had a Scriabin phase, of course, and then you know, of course, there are things of Bartók I really like about his counterpoint ideas, and that's a big inspiration, as well as Messiaen. There's so much I listen to. Friends turned me on to really weird things like Henry Cow and like Frank Zappa and country music. There's just really I feel like I'm just a sponge, just trying to take in what's coming, and if something feels really good in that moment and I'm moved by it, then I'll suck that in, and it'll somehow, yeah, I think it is like dreaming to improvise and play, because your subconscious will put something interesting together.
Yeah. Deanna also mentioned something about the space concept from the Grateful Dead. It's really kind of reminiscent of that. I can totally connect that too. It's fun.
That's really cool. You know, this is kind of embarrassing because I'm not a musician, but I was thinking, gosh, there's something really Ed Wood about this instrument. You know, these kind of, you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space kind of feeling to it. And then I thought that other piece that you played with your band, at first it reminded me of Sonic Youth. And I think it's that weird tuning they use. It's kind of like a similar sound. So I thought that was really interesting. We have another question from Christina, and Christina wants to know, she says, I noticed there were some notes, C1, B2 on your pedals. Could you elaborate? She said, also, thank you.
Hi, Christina. I know Christina in Calgary, Canada.
Wow.
So, yes, that's a good question. That was just for me plugging in my pedals. Like I wrote like on some of them like A, B, C, D, E, F as just the order if somebody else was helping me to plug in my cables, or sometimes even for myself, because I'm often changing the order of them but to remind myself, you know, if I'm, because sometimes there will be like 8 or 9 pedals on the floor, and when I need to set it up quickly, without thinking, then I'll put these little sticker tapes, and 1 and 2 is like for, you know, in and out, let's say, and that's just my way of keeping track of it, because people say, why don't you use a pedal board? And it's like, sadly, it doesn't work really with my setup because it's kind of on both sides of the floor, and
You kind of just figure it out. So I have a last question for you, and this is from all of us. We want to hear about your new release on Bandcamp, and you have an event coming up that you wanted to announce.
Yes. So on Bandcamp, it's my first time doing something on Bandcamp, and it's the Jataka Suite. I was commissioned by this group, Odes and Fragments, Danny Tunick and Chris Manigan, to write something for alto sax and marimba. And I have some theremin in there, but it's kind of doing more of like a supporting role. And I don't know how to describe it, but it's free to listen to online. And say, you know, Jatakas are the stories of Buddha's previous incarnations, and it's sort of like the inspiration, at least, for the different titles. But yeah, one of the pieces in there, Boulezbian, that's kind of funny. I was trying to ask a friend, how do you pronounce, you know, Boulez's name, because I've always seen it written, and I said, you know, is it pronounced like creme brulee or Boulezbian? And then it's like, okay. And I actually I kind of stole from, there's this thing in the New York Times where they had a sample of these yet to be released piano works, and there's this kind of monophonic piano line thing that was really super fast, but then I, you know, transcribed that snippet and then built from it, and that kind of gave me a different set of parameters to work with, and there's a logic behind it. And then I rearranged it also for string quartet later on. But there's a lot of stuff on my website to catch, you know, whether it be links to hearing the arrangements I've done with string quartet, because I like doing traditionally things too, or mixing it with jazz, and then also the different groups and people that I play with, a very diverse range of musical things. And the next event I have coming up that will be live streamed is with this band Blue Blue, at the same club that we saw this video clip, and there'll be a link. It's Purgy, PURGY.AT, and that's on April Fool's Day. Vienna time, it'll be 8:30 in the evening here, but there in California, we'll have our time change finally, so it'll be 11:30 in the morning for all of you out there. In New York, that would be then 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and it's free, pay-as-you-wish donation if you want to the club. And so we'll be doing a full set, like about an hour set of all our 20. And I'm sure, you know, it's April Fool's Day. It's like, I have to do something dorky, goofy, like has to be some joke in there. Maybe the joke is we just be very serious, but.
That's awesome. We'll definitely check that out. And the links for all these things, your Bandcamp, your website, and the event, Abby's going to put in the description, so you guys will see it on Facebook and YouTube, and they'll be clickable, so you can find them there. I want to thank you guys so much, both of you, George and Pamelia, all the way from Austria. I mean, I really appreciate you being here, and everybody, the comments, you make sure you read them later, because got a lot of positive feedback and people really loved it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm really happy to have the chance to do this with you.
Oh, yeah, it's our treat. And, you know, if you ever come back to the U.S. and want to come by Rio, I'm sure a lot of people would love to have you.
Yes.
I have one last announcement. You know, next week is our final event for cultural events. There will be other things at Rio for theater and music, but the last cultural event that we have scheduled is the second Women in Tech talk with Dr. George Gomez Wheeler, and that's March 25th at 7:30 p.m. We will have Sarah Bell Reed with us. So please join us again to see Sarah and George talk about her music. Thank you again so much. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
And good morning over here.
Thank you so much.